The sound of the coring drill was a high-pitched scream that seemed to tear the very fabric of the afternoon apart. It was a mechanical shriek, the sound of tungsten carbide teeth grinding against 300-million-year-old granite, spinning violently in a void where water should have been. Dr. Sarah Jenkins stood with her arms crossed over her chest, her safety goggles reflecting the blinding, bleached white expanse of the Nevada basin, watching the rig shudder. There was no mud. There was never any mud. For 3 weeks, the only thing the multimillion-dollar hydraulic rig had spat back at them was a fine, gray powder that tasted like gunpowder and disappointment. The heat was a physical weight, a heavy, suffocating blanket that pressed down on her shoulders and made the air shimmer in hallucinogenic waves. It was 104 degrees in the shade, but out here on the exposed ridge overlooking the town of Dry Creek, the temperature gauge on the equipment cluster read 118. Sarah watched the rig operator, a burly man named Miller whose skin had turned the color of cured tobacco, slam his gloved hand against the emergency stop button. The screaming died, replaced instantly by the overwhelming, ringing silence of the desert. The silence was worse. The silence was the sound of a coffin lid closing. Miller climbed down from the rig, his boots crunching loudly on the scorched earth. He didn't look at Sarah. He walked straight to the core sample tray, unlatched the steel cylinder, and dumped its contents onto the folding table. The cylinder of rock rolled out. It was gray, dense, and utterly hopelessly dry. It cracked in the heat as soon as it touched the air. Sarah didn't need to run the hygrometer test. She didn't need to look at the spectral analysis. She could feel the dryness radiating from the stone like heat from an oven door. This was the 12th site, the 12th hope, the 12th failure. That's the basement rock, Sarah? Miller said, his voice raspy, coated in the same dust that covered everything in the valley. He took a swig from a lukewarm canteen, swished the water around his mouth, and spat it onto the ground. The spit evaporated in seconds, leaving a tiny, dark stain that vanished before their eyes. We punched through the alluvial layer 2 hours ago. We're grinding bedrock now. If there was an aquifer here, it dried up around the time the dinosaurs were dying. Sarah ran a hand through her hair, wincing as her fingers snagged on tangles matted with grit. She looked past Miller, down into the valley where the town of Dry Creek lay sprawled like a skeleton picked clean by vultures. From this elevation, the town looked peaceful, almost picturesque in its geometry. But Sarah knew it was a deception. The green squares of the cornfields were now brown, brittle scabs on the landscape. The majestic cottonwood trees that lined the creek bed, the creek that had given the town its name, were gray ghosts, their leafless branches clawing at the sky in silent prayer. The reservoir, once a sapphire jewel that drew fishermen from 3 counties, was now a vast, cracked mosaic of dried mud, smelling of rot and ancient decay. "Pack it up," Sarah said softly. Miller looked at her, wiping sweat from his eyes. "We have fuel for 2 more test sites, maybe 3 if we push the generator." "Pack it up," she repeated, her voice harder this time, though it pained her to say it. "There's no point. The seismic reflection data was our last shot. It showed a density anomaly here. We thought it was a cavern, a trapped pocket. It wasn't. It was just denser rock." She picked up the piece of granite, feeling its heat burn her palm. "We're burning diesel to chase ghosts, Miller. It's over." The drive back to town was a slow procession through the apocalypse. Sarah steered the white government Jeep carefully, dodging potholes that had widened into craters as the ground beneath the asphalt contracted from the lack of moisture. The air conditioning in the Jeep rattled and wheezed, blowing tepid air that smelled of ozone and hot plastic. She passed the Henderson farm first. The chaotic jumble of farm equipment sat rusting in the fields, abandoned where it had stopped working. A swing set in the front yard moved slightly in the hot wind, the chains squeaking, but there were no children. The Hendersons had left 2 weeks ago, piling their life into a U-Haul and heading for Oregon. They were the lucky ones. They had relatives with spare rooms. As she entered the town limits, the atmosphere shifted from desolate to hostile. Dry Creek wasn't just suffering. It was angry. The heat had shortened tempers and frayed nerves. Main Street was a tunnel of closed shutters and for sale signs that had long since faded in the UV radiation. A few pickup trucks were parked diagonally in front of the diner, their windshields covered in sunshades. Men sat on the benches outside the hardware store, whittling wood or just staring at the ground. As the white Jeep with the State Water Resources Control Board emblem on the door rolled past, the heads lifted. The eyes that followed her were hard, flinty, and devoid of welcome. To them, she wasn't a savior anymore. She was the doctor telling the patient the cancer was terminal. She was the visible face of the bureaucracy that had regulated their water usage, capped their wells, and now finally failed to save them. Sarah parked in front of the town hall, a brick building that radiated heat like a kiln. She sat in the car for a moment, gripping the steering wheel until her knuckles turned white. She closed her eyes and tried to remember the sound of rain. She tried to conjure the memory of a storm in Seattle, the smell of wet pavement, the feeling of cold drops hitting her face. But the memory was distant, faded, overshadowed by the relentless reality of the red dust. She checked her reflection in the rearview mirror. Dark circles bruised the skin under her eyes. Her lips were chapped and peeling. She looked 10 years older than she had when she arrived a month ago. "Pull it together," she whispered to the empty car. She grabbed her tablet, the heavy Pelican case containing the hard drives, and stepped out into the furnace. Inside the town hall, the air was stagnant. The swamp coolers on the roof had failed days ago, clogged with dust or simply unable to cope with the thermal load. The main chamber, which doubled as the gymnasium and the community meeting center, was being prepped for the evening assembly. Rows of folding metal chairs were arranged in concentric semicircles facing a wooden podium. The floorboards creaked under her boots as she walked toward the makeshift command center set up in the mayor's office at the back. Mayor Vance was there, pacing the small room like a caged tiger. He was a large man, once jovial, now deflated. His suit jacket was draped over a chair, his shirt soaked through with sweat, his tie loosened. He looked up sharply as Sarah entered, his eyes darting immediately to the tablet in her hand, searching for a flicker of hope. "Well?" Vance asked. The word hung in the air, heavy and desperate. Sarah didn't stop walking until she placed the tablet on the desk. She poured herself a glass of water from the cooler in the corner. The water was warm and tasted metallic, piped in from the emergency tanker trucks the National Guard sent once a week. She drank it in one long gulp before turning to face him. "Nothing, Vance. We hit basement rock at 300 feet. Dry as a bone." Vance slumped into his chair, the leather groaning under his weight. He covered his face with his hands. "Jesus, Sada, that was the spot. The satellite data. You said the satellite data showed an anomaly." "It was a density variation," Sarah corrected, her tone clinical, a defense mechanism she used to keep from screaming. "We hoped it was water. It was just a shift in the granite composition. The geology here is hostile, Mayor. The aquifer didn't just retreat. It collapsed. The subterranean structure that held the water for 10,000 years has been crushed by the weight of the rock above it because we pumped it dry. There is no sponge left to hold the water, even if it rained tomorrow." Vance looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. "You can't say that tonight. You can't tell them that. If you tell them there's no hope, this town will tear itself apart. We've already had 2 fights at the gas station this morning." Old Man Miller pulled a shotgun on his neighbor over a garden hose. "If you take away the hope, you take away the law." "I can't lie to them," Sarah said, her voice rising slightly. "They need to evacuate. The state is ready to declare a level 5 disaster. The trucks are on standby in Reno. If we don't move these people within 48 hours, people are going to start dying of dehydration and heat stroke. The elderly, the kids. The infrastructure is failing, Vance. The sewer lines are backing up because there's no water to flush them. It's a health hazard. It's over." Vance stood up, slamming his hand on the desk. "This is my home, Sarah. My grandfather built this hall. You don't just tell 3,000 people to pack a suitcase and walk away from their lives because your computer says so." "My computer isn't wrong." Sarah snapped back, the frustration finally boiling over. "The ground is wrong. The sky is wrong. Look out the window, Vance. The world is burning, and I can't fix it with a spreadsheet. I tried. I drilled 12 holes in this godforsaken rock. I have barely slept. I have barely eaten. I want to find water just as much as you do, but magic doesn't exist. Physics dictates that we are done. The silence returned, thicker than before. Vance stared at her, breathing heavily. Slowly, the fight drained out of him. He looked at the clock on the wall. It was 6:45 p.m. The meeting was scheduled for 7 o'clock. Okay, Vance whispered. Okay, we tell them. The next 15 minutes were a blur of dread. Sarah sat in the corner of the office, uploading the final report to the state server, finalizing the death warrant of Dry Creek. Outside the office door, the gymnasium began to fill. It wasn't the boisterous gathering of a town fair or the polite murmur of a city council meeting. It was the shuffling of refugees. Sarah could hear the low hum of hundreds of voices, a sound that vibrated with anxiety. She heard the crying of a baby, thin and weak. She heard the coughing of men whose lungs were full of dust. At 7 p.m. sharp, Vance opened the door. It's time. Walking out onto the stage felt like walking to the gallows. The gymnasium was packed to capacity. Every seat was taken. People were standing along the walls, spilling out into the hallway. The air was incredibly close, smelling of unwashed bodies, stale tobacco, and fear. As Sarah stepped up to the podium, the hum of conversation died instantly. 3,000 eyes locked onto her. She saw faces she recognized. The waitress from the diner, the mechanic who fixed her tire, the mother she had seen buying distilled water at the pharmacy. They looked gaunt, their skin papery, their clothes hanging loosely on their frames. Sarah adjusted the microphone. It squealed, a sharp feedback loop that made everyone flinch. She placed her notes on the podium, her hands shaking slightly. She looked at Vance, who gave her a barely perceptible nod. Citizens of Dry Creek, Sarah began, her voice echoing in the cavernous, hot room. She hated how clinical she sounded. She wanted to scream, to cry, but she forced herself to be the scientist. As you know, for the past month, the State Water Board has been conducting an exhaustive geological survey of the subterranean strata beneath the valley. She paused. A fly buzzed near the microphone, the sound amplified like a chainsaw. We have utilized ground-penetrating radar, seismic reflection, and exploratory drilling. She continued, her eyes scanning the crowd, looking for a friendly face and finding none. We have explored every potential aquifer, every fault line, and every historical water table indicated in the records. She took a deep breath. This was it, the moment the town died. I regret to inform you, Sarah said, the words tasting like ash, that we have found no viable water source. The structural integrity of the aquifer has failed. The water table has dropped below the reach of any residential or municipal pumping equipment. The geological data indicates that there is no water left to find. A murmur started in the back of the room, a low growl of disbelief. This can't be. A man shouted from the middle row. We've been here 100 years. The creek always comes back. The climate has changed, Sarah said, trying to keep her voice level. The drought cycle is unprecedented. We are recommending a mandatory evacuation order, effective immediately. The National Guard will arrive at dawn to assist with transport to the FEMA center in... Liar, a woman screamed. You just want the land. You want to sell it to the mining companies. Please listen to me, Sarah pleaded, gripping the podium. There is no conspiracy. There is just no water. Staying here is suicide. We have to leave. The room erupted. People stood up, shouting, shaking their fists. The despair had instantly converted into rage. It was a riot in the making. Vance stepped forward to the microphone, trying to shout over the din, but he was drowned out. Sarah felt a wave of dizziness. The heat, the noise, the hatred, it was too much. She looked at the exit signs, wondering if she could make it to her car before they stormed the stage. Then, the double doors at the very back of the hall didn't just open. They slammed against the walls with a violence that cut through the noise like a thunderclap. The shouting stopped. Heads turned. The crowd parted, instinctively, creating a wide aisle down the center of the room. Framed in the doorway, silhouetted against the dying purple light of the dusk, stood a figure. He was lean, almost skeletal, but he stood with the upright rigidity of a jagged fence post. He wore a duster coat that was stained with oil and clay, and a Stetson hat that was battered beyond recognition. He carried no weapon, no sign, no protest banner. In his right hand, hanging loosely by his side, was a fork of wood, a simple, peeled branch of willow, shaped like the letter Y. It was Elias, the town ghost, the man who lived in a shack made of corrugated tin on the edge of the Badlands. The man who hadn't spoken a word in town for 10 years. He walked down the aisle. His boots thudded rhythmically on the hardwood floor. Thud, thud, thud. He didn't look left or right. He looked straight ahead, his eyes fixed on Sarah. They were pale blue eyes, terrifyingly clear in a face etched with the roadmap of the desert. He reached the front of the stage and stopped. The silence in the room was absolute now, heavy with a strange electric tension. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. Elias slowly raised the willow branch, pointing it at the podium, pointing it at the maps, pointing it at the science. "You're listening to the wrong things," Elias said. His voice wasn't loud, but it projected to the back of the room. A gravelly baritone that sounded like stones grinding together in a riverbed. "You're listening to echoes. You ain't listening to the heartbeat." Sarah stared down at him, paralyzed by the sheer intensity of his presence. "Mr. Elias," she stammered, falling back on formalities. "We have used the most advanced sensors in the world. There is nothing down there." Elias climbed the stairs to the stage. He moved with a fluid, predatory grace that belied his age. He stood next to her, smelling of sagebrush and ozone. He placed the willow branch on her stack of geological reports. "The water is singing," Elias whispered, close enough that only Sarah could hear. "It's screaming to be let out, and I'm gonna go cut the lock." He turned to the crowd, raised his broom, and spoke 3 words that shattered Sarah's data and ignited a fire in the ashes of the town. "I found it." The silence that followed Elias's declaration was not the absence of sound. It was a vacuum, a sudden, breath-stealing void that sucked the oxygen right out of the town hall. 3,000 people stood frozen, caught between the crushing weight of Sarah's scientific certainty and the terrifying, fragile hope offered by the old man on the stage. For a heartbeat, the only movement was the dust motes dancing in the singular spotlight that illuminated the brim of Elias's hat. Then, the spell broke, not with a cheer, but with a chaotic murmur that swelled like a rising tide. It was the sound of desperate people bargaining with reality. Sarah felt the shift in the room immediately. It was a physical sensation, a turning of the tide that left her stranded. She stepped forward, gripping the edge of the podium until her knuckles turned white, her voice sharp and pleading into the microphone. "Listen to me, please. This is a delusion. We have mapped the bedrock. We have run the simulations. There is no geological mechanism that could support a water table in the location he is suggesting. If you delay the evacuation for this folklore, people will die." But they weren't looking at her anymore. They were looking at Elias. The old well repairman didn't argue. He didn't shout. He simply turned around, walked down the stairs of the stage, and began to march back up the center aisle. He moved with a singular, terrifying purpose, his boots thudding against the floorboards with a rhythm that sounded like a heartbeat. As he passed the rows of chairs, men reached out to touch the hem of his duster coat, and women clutched their children tight, their eyes wide with a mixture of reverence and fear. Mayor Vance stood paralyzed on the stage, looking from the weeping woman in the front row to the retreating back of the old man. Then, with a groan of defeat that was audible only to Sarah, Vance grabbed his radio. "Alert the drilling crew," he muttered, his voice hollow. "Tell them to fuel the rig. We follow him." "Vance, you can't be serious," Sarah hissed, grabbing his arm. "You're authorizing a wild goose chase based on a stick?" That rig consumes 50 gallons of diesel an hour. We need that fuel for the evacuation buses. Vance pulled his arm away, his eyes hard. Look at them, Sarah. They won't get on the buses. Not until they see the hole is dry. They need to see the corpse before they believe the death. The next morning, the sun rose like a bloody wound on the horizon, bleeding red light across a landscape that looked more like Mars than Nevada. The heat was instantaneous, leaping from 70 degrees to 90 within 30 minutes of dawn. Sarah sat in her white Jeep, the engine idling, the air conditioner fighting a losing battle against the ambient temperature. She watched through the windshield as Elias prepared his truck. It was a 1970s Ford, a rusted beast of iron and bondo that looked like it had been welded together from scrap. He was tying a water drum to the flatbed, his movements slow and methodical. He didn't look like a savior. He looked like a relic. Sarah shifted her Jeep into drive and pulled up alongside him. She rolled down the window, the blast of heat hitting her face like a physical slap. "I'm coming with you," she said. It wasn't a request.
Elias paused, tightening on it.
He looked at her, his blue eyes shaded by the Stetson. "Suit yourself, doctor, but your machine won't like where we're going." "My machine is designed for off-road terrain," she countered, tapping the steering wheel. "And I need to document this. When we find nothing, I need a record of exactly where we looked so I can explain to the state why we wasted emergency resources." Elias cracked a smile, a dry shifting of skin that looked painful. "You bring your record, doctor. I'll bring the water." They rolled out of town in a bizarre convoy. Elias took the lead, his truck coughing black smoke, followed by Sarah's gleaming government Jeep, and behind them, the massive, lumbering heavy drill rig transport, followed by the mayor's SUV. They didn't head toward the valley floor where the sediment was soft. Elias turned north, toward the Devil's Anvil, a jagged upheaval of volcanic rock that formed the rim of the basin. It was a place geologists called a dead zone. The rock was igneous, non-porous, and fractured. It was the last place on Earth anyone would look for an aquifer. As they left the paved road and hit the gravel, the dust enveloped them. Sarah had to drop back 100 yards just to see the taillights of Elias's truck. The terrain grew hostile. The gentle slopes of the farmland gave way to sharp ravines and boulders the size of small cars. Sarah's Jeep bucked and swayed, the suspension groaning. She glanced at her GPS. They were heading into a blank spot on the map, a sector marked only by elevation lines and the warning: extreme terrain. After 2 hours of bone-jarring driving, Elias stopped. He didn't pull over. He simply stopped in the middle of a wash, a dry riverbed of white stones that reflected the sun with blinding intensity. The drill rig and the mayor halted behind them. Sarah watched as Elias stepped out of his truck. He didn't take a drink of water. He reached into the cab and pulled out the willow branch. Sarah grabbed her tablet and her sensor pack and exited the Jeep. The heat was ferocious now, a staggering 110 degrees. The air tasted of sulfur and baked iron. She marched up to Elias, who was standing perfectly still, staring at a wall of sheer cliff face about half a mile away. "Why did we stop?" Sarah demanded, wiping sweat from her eyes. "There's nothing here but scree and basalt. My ground-penetrating radar is showing solid rock for 500 feet down. It's a monolithic slab, Elias. It's a tombstone." Elias turned the willow branch over in his hands, feeling the texture of the bark. "The rock talks if you know the language," he said softly. "You listen to the echo, doctor. The ping, the bounce back, that tells you how hard the ground is. It don't tell you how thirsty it is." "Water isn't magic," Sarah snapped, her frustration boiling over. "It's physics. It's gravity and porosity. It flows downhill. It pools in sediment. It doesn't hide inside solid volcanic rock just because you want it to." "You think water is just stuff," Elias said, looking at her with an unsettling intensity. "You think it's H2O. 2 hydrogen, 1 oxygen. Just a chemical." He took a step closer to her. "Water is blood. The earth is a body. It has veins. It has arteries. And sometimes, when the skin gets too hard, The blood goes deep to keep the heart alive. The heat up here? He gestured to the shimmering horizon. It's a fever. The earth is sick. And when a body is sick, the pulse hides. That is a lovely metaphor, Sarah said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. But metaphors don't fill canteens. We are wasting time. Then go back, Elias challenged, his voice suddenly hard. Go back to your air conditioning and your evacuation buses. Why are you here, Sarah? You think I'm crazy. You think I'm a fraud. So why are you standing in the sun with me? Sarah opened her mouth to retort, but the words died in her throat. Why was she here? It wasn't just to prove him wrong. She felt a gnawing emptiness in her gut, a desperate, illogical desire to be proven wrong. She was a scientist, but she was also a human being watching a town die. She wanted the magic to be real, even if she couldn't admit it. I'm here to stop you from killing these people with false hope, she said finally, though the conviction was weaker than before. Elias nodded slowly. Fear makes you hold on tight to what you know. Let go, doctor, just for an hour. He turned his back on her and began to walk toward the cliff face. He held the willow branch in front of him, gripping the two forks with his palms facing upward, his elbows tucked against his ribs. The single long stem of the Y pointed straight ahead, parallel to the ground. Sarah followed, keeping a distance of 10 feet. She turned on her portable gravimeter, a heavy device strapped to her chest that measured minute fluctuations in gravitational density. If there was a large body of water, a cavern, a river, the density would drop. She watched the needle. It didn't twitch. It held steady at the baseline for solid rock. Nothing, she whispered into her voice recorder. Subject is proceeding towards the basalt formation. Gravimetric readings are nominal. No anomalies. Elias walked with a strange, shuffling gait. He wasn't looking at the ground. His eyes were unfocused, staring at the middle distance. The silence of the desert was absolute, broken only by the crunch of their boots. 10 minutes passed. 20. The heat was making Sarah dizzy. Black spots danced in her vision. She took a sip from her camelback, water warm and plastic tasting. Elias, she called out, her voice rasping. This is dangerous. We're too exposed. He didn't answer. He was entering a trance. Sarah noticed that his breathing had changed. It was shallow, rhythmic, syncing with his steps. The muscles in his forearms were tight, cords of tension wrapping around the bone. Suddenly, the willow branch twitched. It wasn't a gust of wind. The air was dead still. The tip of the stick dipped, just an inch, then snapped back up. Sarah stopped. She looked at the gravimeter. Nothing. Did you do that? She asked. You moved your wrists. Elias didn't speak. He took another step. The stick jerked again, harder this time. It dipped downward with enough force that Elias's shoulders slumped forward. He grunted, a low sound of exertion. It's starting, he whispered. What is? Sarah moved closer, fascinated despite herself. She watched his hands. His grip on the branch was white-knuckled. He was fighting it. He was trying to keep the stick level, but an invisible force was dragging the tip toward the earth. The pull, Elias gritted out through clenched teeth. It's heavy. He stumbled forward, his boots sliding on the loose scree. The stick was vibrating now, a high-frequency shudder that Sarah could hear, a low thrumming sound like a plucked cello string. Elias's face was contorted in pain. Sweat poured down his temples, mixing with the dust to form streaks of blood. Stop it, Sarah said, alarmed. You're going to hurt yourself. I can't. Stop it, Elias yelled. He was wrestling with the branch. It looked like he was holding a live snake. The wood groaned, the fibers stretching. They were standing on a shelf of rock directly beneath the devil's anvil. The ground here was solid obsidian and basalt, forged in fire millions of years ago. It was the hardest rock on the planet. Here, Elias shouted. It's right here. The stick violently slammed downward, pulled Elias to his knees. The impact was brutal. His knees cracked against the stone, tearing his chains. He didn't let go. The branch was bent into a perfect U shape, the tip grinding into machine. Sarah looked down at the gravimeter on her chest. The needle was buried in the red. "That's impossible," she breathed. The device was malfunctioning. It had to be. It was reading a massive density void. A void that shouldn't exist in volcanic rock. It was reading an ocean. "It's a fault," Sarah stammered, her mind racing to find a rational explanation. "It's a magnetic anomaly interfering with the sensor. It's the iron content in the basalt." "It's the river," Elias gasped. He finally released one hand, and the stick whipped back, hitting him in the chest, but he kept the tip pressed to the rock with the other hand. He looked up at her, his face gray with exhaustion, blood dripping from his hand onto the black stone. "It's the Stygian flow. Deep water, pressurized. It's been waiting for 1,000,000 years." He collapsed sideways, breathing heavily, clutching his chest. Sarah stared at the spot where the stick had pointed. There was nothing there but black rock, hot enough to fry an egg. She looked back at the convoy approaching in the distance, the mayor's SUV and the lumbering drill rig. They were trusting her. They were trusting him. She looked at Elias, who was curled in a fetal position, nursing his bleeding hands. He looked frail, broken, entirely human. But the gravimeter was still screaming. The mayor's SUV pulled up, dust billowing around them. Vance jumped out, running toward them. "Elias, Sarah, is he okay?" Sarah stood up. Her legs felt shaky. She looked at the mayor, then at the spot on the ground, then at the massive drill rig pulling up behind him. The rig that had failed 12 times. The rig that represented their last chance. She took a can of orange spray paint from her belt. Her hand trembled as she shook it. The rattle of the mixing ball sounded like a rattlesnake. "Sarah?" Vance asked, breathless. Is there anything?" Sarah looked at the blood on the rock. She looked at the impossible reading on her screen. She looked at the impossible conviction in the old man's eyes. She uncapped the spray paint. "Bring the rig," Sarah said, her voice steady, loud, commanding. She sprayed a bright, neon orange X on the black rock. "We drill here." "Here?" The foreman Miller had walked up, looking at the ground with disdain. "Sarah, this is solid obsidian. It'll chew up my diamond bits in an hour. You want me to drill into the devil's anvil? You're out of your mind." "I don't care if it chews up the rig, Miller," Sarah said, turning to face him. The scientist in her retreating, replaced by something primal, something she had caught from Elias. "You drill until you hit water, or you drill until the engine melts. But you do not stop. Do you understand me?" Miller looked at her, stunned by the ferocity in her tone. He looked at the orange X. He spat on the ground. "All right, it's your funeral document." As the crew began to shout orders and the hydraulic stabilizers of the rig began to descend, hissing like waking dragons, Sarah knelt back down beside Elias. She offered him her canteen. He took a sip, his hands shaking. "You felt it?" he whispered, a small smile touching his lips. "You didn't see it. You felt it." "Rest now, Elias," Sarah said, looking at the drill bit positioning over the orange X. The noise is about to start. The roar of the diesel engine revving up shattered the stillness of the desert. The massive steel tower rose against the sun. As the first rotation of the drill bit bit into the rock, sending a shower of sparks flying, Sarah felt a chill run down her spine that had nothing to do with the heat. She had crossed the line. She had abandoned the data for a divining rod. If this hole was dry, she wasn't just destroying her career. She was destroying the soul of the town. But as the drill screamed, digging into the earth, Sarah found herself doing something she hadn't done since she was a child. She crossed her fingers. The violence of the drilling was something that no geological textbook could have prepared Sarah for. It was not a process of excavation. It was an act of war. The Devil's Anvil was fighting back with a prehistoric ferocity. The obsidian and basalt layers rejecting the tungsten carbide teeth of the drill bit with jarring, metal-shrieking resistance. For the first 4 hours, the progress was measured not in feet, but in inches. The rig, a towering structure of yellow steel that usually hummed with a rhythmic, industrial efficiency, was convulsing. It shook so violently that the heavy chains hanging from the derrick clanged against the frame like church bells in a hurricane. The noise was absolute. A grinding, tearing scream that obliterated thought and conversation, forcing the crew to communicate with hand signals and frantic shouting into radios that were barely audible over the din. Sarah stood near the command console, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, watching the digital depth gauge. It read 68 feet. They needed to be at 300 to even begin hoping, and at this rate, they would burn through their fuel reserves before midnight. The sun had begun its slow, bleeding descent toward the western horizon, turning the sky into a bruise of purple and orange, but the heat refused to break. The rocks around them radiated the stored energy of the day, creating an oven-like vortex around the ring. Floodlights had been set up, casting long, grotesque shadows that danced against the cliff face, making the machinery look like a skeletal beast feasting on the earth. By dusk, the spectacle had drawn a crowd. Word had spread through Dry Creek like a contagion. The crazy old man and the government doctor were drilling into the devil's inlet. It was a suicide mission, a final act of madness, and everyone wanted to see the end. Pickup trucks lined the ridge overlooking the wash, their headlights cutting through the dust. Families sat on tailgates, sharing the last of their bottled water, watching the yellow beast roar. It was a vigil for a dying town, a silent, judgmental audience waiting for the inevitable failure. Temperature is spiking on the rotary table, Miller screamed, spitting a wad of tobacco juice that was black with dust. He was fighting the control levers, his biceps bulging as he tried to keep the bit from seizing. She's running too hot, Sarah. The mud pumps can't cycle the coolant fast enough. We're drilling into solid glass. Keep it turning, Sarah shouted back, stepping into his personal space, her face smeared with grease. If you stop now, the sediment will settle and lock the bit. We'll lose the hole. Do not stop. We're gonna lose the transmission, Miller yelled, pointing at a gauge that was hovering dangerously in the red zone. I've got warnings on the torque converter. This rig is rated for sedimentary rock, maybe limestone. This is igneous, Sarah. It's like drilling into a bank vault. Sarah looked over her shoulder at Elias. The old man hadn't moved for 6 hours. He was sitting on a folding camp chair near the edge of the drilling platform, just outside the spray of the mud. He held the willow branch across his lap, his eyes closed, his head tilted slightly as if listening to a song no one else could hear. He looked frail, the dust settling in the deep creases of his face, making him look like a statue carved from the canyon itself. He was the eye of the storm, unbothered by the mechanical screaming, unbothered by the jeering that had started to drift down from the spectators on the ridge. Hey, give it up, a voice echoed from the darkness above. Go home, Elias, let us die in peace. Snake oil, another shouted. You're burning our gas. Sarah felt a surge of protective anger. She grabbed the radio handset. Miller increased the weight on the bit. Push it. You'll snap the stem, Miller warned, his eyes wide. Push it, she commanded. Miller cursed, slamming the lever forward. The engine roared, a deep, guttural bellow that shook the ground beneath their feet. The rig groaned, the steel twisting under the torque. The depth counter began to tick faster. 70 feet, 80, 100. The vibration became a physical assault, rattling Sarah's teeth, blurring her vision. Sparks showered down from the rotary table, a cascade of fire in the night. Then, at 11:42 p.m., disaster struck. It wasn't an explosion. It was a sound far more sickening. A high-pitched ping followed by a sickening crunch, like a bone breaking, and then the sickening whine of the engine freewheeling. The drill string dropped 3 feet instantly, then slammed to a halt. The roar of the grinding rock stopped, replaced by the high idle of the diesel engine. Silence rushed back into the valley, heavy and suffocating. She's sheared, Miller said, his voice flat. He cut the engine. The silence was absolute. We snapped the collar. The bit is gone. Stuck down there at 150 feet. Sarah stared at the motionless rotary table. The sudden quiet was ringing in her ears. From the ridge, a slow, Mocking applause began. It started with one person, then grew. A slow clap, a rhythm of cynicism. Mayor Vance walked up from his SUV, his face pale in the floodlights. "Is it over?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Did we break it?" "We snapped the drill bit," Sarah said, her voice hollow. She looked at the ground. She couldn't look at Elias. She felt a crushing weight of guilt. She had pushed too hard. She had let her desperation drive the machine past its limit. "We have to trip the pipe. We have to pull the entire string out, fish out the broken junk, and attach a new diamond bit. If we even have one. That will take 6 hours," Miller said, wiping his face with a rag. "And we don't have the fuel to restart the heavy rotation. We're done, document. We tried." Sarah looked at the crowd on the ridge. They were starting to leave. Headlights were turning on, red taillights fading into the darkness. The show was over. The magician had failed. The town was dead. "No," a voice said. Elias was standing next to the rig. He had walked up silently. He placed his hand on the hot metal of the drill stem. "It didn't break because of the rock," he said softly. "It broke because you hit the ceiling." "The ceiling?" Miller scoffed, kicking a wrench across the platform. "We hit the bottom of hell, old man. We broke the best steel money can buy." "The ceiling of the cavern," Elias continued, ignoring him. "The roof. The rock is hardest right before it gives way. It's protecting the treasure." He looked at Sarah. His blue eyes were piercing, lit by a strange, inner fire that exhaustion couldn't extinguish. "You don't stop knocking just because your knuckles bleed, Sarah." Sarah looked at the broken machine. She looked at Miller, who was already packing his tool bag. She looked at the mayor, who was weeping silently into his hands. She thought about the physics. If Elias was right, if they had hit the capstone of a pressurized aquifer, the rock density would indeed be highest at the compression point. But if he was wrong, they would spend the last of the town's resources chasing a fantasy. She looked at the willow branch in Elias's hand. It was still bent. It hadn't straightened out. The tension was still there. "Miller," Sarah said. "Don't," Miller warned. "Don't ask me to do it." "We have a spare diamond bit in the box," Sarah said. "I saw it on the inventory manifest. We have 50 gallons of diesel in the reserve tank of the Jeep. We can siphon it." "You're crazy," Miller said, shaking his head. "The crew is exhausted. We've been awake for 20 hours. It's impossible." "Get the fishing magnet," Sarah ordered, her voice cold and hard. "We are going to pull that junk out of the hole. We are going to recollar. And we are going to drill until this rig explodes or until we find water. Those are the only 2 options that get you off this mountain, Miller." Miller stared at her for a long, tense moment. He looked at the crazy old man. He looked at the crazy scientist. Then he let out a long, ragged sigh. "Boys!" he shouted to his crew, who were slumped against the tires. "Get the winch. We're fishing." The next 5 hours were a blur of agony. The work was brutal, physical, and maddeningly slow. They had to manually disconnect each 30-foot section of steel pipe, hoist it out, and stack it. Then they had to lower a magnetic grapple to catch the broken shards of the drill bit. The heat of the night was oppressive, the air thick with moths swarming the floodlights. Sarah worked alongside the men, her hands slick with hydraulic fluid, her muscles burning. She siphoned fuel from the Jeep, swallowing a mouthful of gasoline in the process, choking and coughing but never stopping. By 4 a.m., the new bit was on. The pipe was back in the hole. The rig was refueled. The crowd on the ridge was gone. Only a few stragglers remained, the desperate ones, the ones with nowhere else to go. "Contact in 10 seconds, Miller announced over the intercom. His voice was hoarse. "This is it, Sarah. One shot. If this bit breaks, we don't have another." "Do it," Sarah whispered. The engine roared back to life. The sound was different this time. Desperate, strained. The rotary table began to spin. The vibration returned, shaking the fatigue out of their bones. Screech. The sound of the diamond teeth hitting the obstruction was deafening. The rig bucked. 152 feet. Sarah read the gauge. We're past the break point. It's grinding. Miller yelled. Torque is maxed out. We're not moving. 10 minutes passed. They gained 1 inch. 20 minutes. Another inch. The sun began to crack the eastern horizon. A gray, flat light that offered no warmth, only illumination of their failure. They were stuck. The rock was winning. Kill it, Miller said, his hand hovering over the stop button. We're just burning metal now. It's not going through. Wait, Elias said. He stepped onto the platform. This was a violation of every safety protocol in the book. He walked right up to the spinning Kelly bushing, the massive steel joint that drove the pipe. Get him out of there, Miller screamed. He'll get killed. Elias didn't touch the machinery. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, smooth stone, a river stone. He placed it on the deck of the rig, right next to the spinning pipe. Then he placed his hands on the vibrating steel guardrail. He closed his eyes. Push, Elias whispered. What? Sarah asked, running to him. Push, Elias said louder. Now. Sarah looked at the depth gauge. It hadn't moved. She looked at Miller. They exchanged a look of shared insanity. Full throttle. Sarah screamed. Break it, Miller. Break the damn world. Miller slammed the lever to the stops. The engine howled. Black smoke poured from the exhaust stack, blotting out the dawn. The rig lifted off its front stabilizers, teetering on the edge of destruction. The sound was a physical pain, a scream of metal and fire. Crack. It wasn't the sound of the machine breaking. It was a deeper sound. A sound from the earth. A sound like a thunderclap trapped in a box. The drill stem suddenly dropped. It didn't just slide. It fell. It dropped 5 feet in a second. Free fall, Miller shouted, panic in his voice. We punched through. We hit a void. He slammed on the brakes to catch the pipe before it crashed into the bottom of the cavern. The rig slammed back onto the ground with a bone-jarring thud. The engine revved high, no longer under load. Shut it down, Sarah yelled. Miller killed the engine. The silence returned. But it wasn't silent. From deep inside the hole, 300 feet down into the throat of the Devil's Anvil, came a sound. Hiss. It sounded like a massive lung inhaling. Then a rumble, a vibration that didn't come from the machine, but from the ground itself. The pebbles on the drilling deck began to dance. Back away, Elias shouted, his eyes snapping open. Back away now. He grabbed Sarah's arm and pulled her off the platform. Miller scrambled down the ladder. The rumbling grew louder. It became a roar. The steel pipe sticking out of the ground began to shake violently. Whoosh! A blast of air shot out of the borehole, blowing the heavy steel cap 10 feet into the air. It was followed by a cloud of dust, dry and choking. Dry, Miller groaned, falling to his knees. It's just an air pocket. It's dry. Sarah stared at the hole. Her heart stopped. The dust settled. There was nothing, just a hole in the ground. She felt the tears coming, hot and stinging. They had failed. The science was right. The magic was a lie. She turned to look at Elias, ready to scream at him, ready to curse him for the hope he had stolen. But Elias wasn't looking at the hole. He was looking at the sky. He was smiling. Here it comes, he whispered. A low moan echoed from the earth, a sound so deep it vibrated in Sarah's chest cavity. It sounded like a whale song, amplified 1,000 times. And then the miracle happened. It didn't spray. It didn't trickle. It erupted. A column of water, thick as a tree trunk, brown with mud and fury, blasted out of the borehole. It hit the derrick tower with the force of a freight train, bending the steel crossbeams. It shot 100 feet into the air, higher than the rig, higher than the cliff, mushrooming into a chaotic, magnificent fountain against the dawn sky. It rained. For the first time in 200 days, it rained on Dry Creek. But this rain came from below. Sarah stood frozen, her mouth open, as the water crashed down on her. It was cold, shockingly, painfully cold. It smelled of sulfur and deep earth and life. It soaked her clothes instantly. It washed the grease from her face. It turned the red dust of the drilling platform into a river of mud. Miller was laughing, a hysterical, manic sound. He was rolling in the mud, letting the water pummel him. Sarah turned to Elias. He was standing in the deluge, his hat in his hand. The water matted his gray hair to his skull. He was drenched, shivering, but he looked like a king. He wasn't celebrating. He was mourning. He was thanking. He walked over to the borehole, dangerously close to the jet of water that could snap a man's neck. He knelt down. He reached into the muddy torrent and pulled out his willow branch. It was snapped in two. He held the broken wood to his chest, bowed his head, and wept. Sarah walked toward him, the water roaring around them, deafening and beautiful. She wanted to ask him how. She wanted to ask the scientific probability. She wanted to measure the flow rate. But as she reached him, she realized none of that mattered. She fell to her knees beside him in the mud. She didn't speak. She just cupped her hands, caught the dirty, beautiful water, and drank. The sound was the first thing that changed the world. It wasn't the sound of water as the people of Dry Creek remembered it, not the gentle patter of rain on a tin roof or the babble of the seasonal brook. This was a roar, a continuous, deafening explosion of pressurized liquid that tore through the silence of the desert dawn with the violence of a jet engine. The column of water that erupted from the throat of the Devilsonville didn't fan out immediately. It shot straight up, a solid, white-knuckle punch to the sky, maintaining its structural integrity for nearly 100 feet before gravity finally clawed it back, shattering the column into a torrential, chaotic curtain of spray that obliterated the rising sun. Sarah Jenkins stood in the mud, the cold shock of the deluge soaking through her clothes, plastering her hair to her skull. She couldn't breathe. The air was so saturated with mist that every inhalation was a gasp of liquid. She wiped her eyes, blinking against the sting of minerals and grit, trying to comprehend the sheer physics of what she was witnessing. This wasn't just an aquifer. This was a pressurized arterial vein of the planet, a hydrologic anomaly that defied every survey she had ever conducted. The water was cold, freezing, in fact, indicating it came from profound depths, shielded from the surface heat for millennia. It smelled of sulfur and wet iron, a primal scent that triggered a dormant instinct in her brain. Survival. Move back. Miller was screaming, though his voice was barely audible over the roar. He grabbed Sarah by the back of her vest and hauled her away from the drilling platform. The ground is liquefying. The rig is going to tip. Sarah stumbled back, her boots slipping in the sudden slurry of mud and oil. She looked up at the drilling rig. The massive yellow steel derrick, the machine that had fought the earth and lost, was now being assaulted by the prize it had unearthed. The water was eroding the soil beneath the heavy steel stabilizers. The rig groaned, a metallic shriek that harmonized eerily with the roar of the geyser, and listed 5 degrees to the left. "Cut the power," Sarah yelled, her scientist brain finally overriding her shock. "If that rig tips and the fuel tanks rupture, we'll poison the water before we can save it." Miller scrambled toward the generator unit, slipping and sliding, moving with a frantic energy. He killed the main breaker. The floodlights died, but it didn't matter anymore. The sun had crested the horizon, illuminating the scene in stark, unforgiving relief. The water wasn't clear. It was a churned-up slurry of brown and gray, flashing with rainbows where the light hit the mist. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. Then came the town. It started as a low rumble, separate from the water, coming from the valley floor. Sarah turned to look down the winding access road. A cloud of dust was rising, rapidly approaching. The headlights of the first vehicles were still on, pale yellow eyes in the morning light. Mayor Vance, who had been cowering behind his SUV, stood up, his face a mask of disbelief. "They heard it," Vance whispered, his voice cracking. "My God, they heard it." The first truck, a battered Chevy with a missing tailgate, didn't stop at the designated safety perimeter. It roared up the incline, tires spinning on the loose gravel, and skidded to a halt just yards from the mud line. A man jumped out. It was Henderson, the farmer who had been packing to leave for Oregon. He didn't look at Sarah. He didn't look at the rig. He looked at the water. He ran toward it, not with joy, but with a kind of madness. He threw himself into the spray, falling to his knees, opening his mouth to the sky, letting the brown water fill him, choke him, wash him. Then came the others. Cars, trucks, motorcycles, even a few bicycles. They abandoned their vehicles haphazardly on the road, creating a snarled traffic jam of metal, and ran. It was a stampede. Men, women, children, dogs. They surged up the hill, a wave of humanity meeting the wave of water. The sound of their voices, screams, laughter, sobbing, mixed with the roar of the geyser to create a cacophony that sounded like the end of the world, or perhaps the beginning of a new one. "Stop them!" Sarah shouted, grabbing Vance's arm. "It's too dangerous. The pressure at the borehole could strip the skin off a man. The cliff edge is unstable." Vance looked at her, tears streaming down his face, mixing with the mist. "You can't stop them, Sarah. You might as well try to stop the sun." The crowd swarmed the site. They didn't care about the mud. They didn't care about their clothes. Women in nightgowns fell into the sludge, hugging each other. Old men splashed water onto their faces, rubbing their eyes as if waking from a long nightmare. It was chaos. It was a riot of joy. But amidst the hysteria, there was a danger that Sarah could see clearly. The water was flowing fast, carving a deep gully through the loose scree, heading straight for the drop-off where it would cascade uselessly into the salt flats below. They were losing millions of gallons a minute. "We need to divert it," Sarah screamed, looking for Miller. "Miller, get the backhoe. We need a trench. We have to channel this into the dry creek bed or we lose it all." Miller was already running toward the heavy machinery loader parked on the flatbed trailer. But the crowd was in the way. They were dancing in the path of the machine. "Listen to me." Sarah climbed onto the hood of the mayor's SUV. She grabbed a megaphone from the back seat. The feedback squeal cutting through the din. "Get back. Everyone get back. We are losing the water. If we don't dig a trench now, this water flows into the salt basin and becomes poison. Do you hear me? We have to work." The authority in her voice, sharpened by weeks of command, cut through the euphoria. A few heads turned, then more. "We need shovels," Sarah bellowed, pointing to the eroding channel. "We need sandbags. We need rocks. If you want this water to save your farms, you have to help us catch it. Move." The transformation was instantaneous. The town of Dry Creek, which had been paralyzed by apathy for months, suddenly snapped into action. The hysteria vanished, replaced by a frantic, coordinated labor. Men ran to their trucks and pulled out shovels, pickaxes, and tire irons. Women began forming a human chain, passing rocks from the cliff face to build a dam on the lower side of the flow. Miller fired up the backhoe, the diesel engine coughing smoke. He revved it, honking the horn, and the crowd parted like the Red Sea. He drove the machine right to the edge of the geyser, risking the stability of the ground, and slammed the bucket into the earth. "Dig," Sarah commanded, jumping off the car and joining the line. "Dig south, toward the ravine." For the next 2 hours, there was no distinction between scientist and farmer, mayor and mechanic. They were a single organism, covered in mud, fighting to carve a path for the lifeblood of their town. Sarah found herself shoulder to shoulder with the woman who had called her a liar the night before. They didn't speak. They just shoveled. They heaved wet, heavy clay out of the path, their muscles burning, their breath coming in ragged gasps. The water fought them, trying to break their makeshift dams, but they fought back with a desperation born of survival. Slowly, agonizingly, the flow began to turn. The chaotic spillover was channeled into the trench Miller was digging. It surged forward, a brown snake of water, hitting the dry, cracked earth of the ravine. The ground hissed as the water touched it, absorbing the first wave instantly, but there was too much water to drink. The stream grew. It became a torrent. It flowed over the edge of the ravine and began to thunder down toward the valley floor, aiming straight for the ghost of the old creek bed that ran through the center of town. A cheer went up, ragged, exhausted, but triumphant. They had done it. They had caught the miracle. Sarah leaned on her shovel, her chest heaving. She was trembling from adrenaline and cold. She looked around the chaotic scene, realized she hadn't seen Elias since the eruption began. Panic flared in her chest. Had he been swept away? Had the rig fallen on him? Elias! She called out, scanning the crowd. She found him. He wasn't in the trench. He wasn't celebrating. He had retreated to the far side of the drilling platform, near his old truck. He was sitting on the rear bumper, his head bowed, his hands resting on his knees. But he wasn't alone. A semicircle of silence had formed around him. People were standing 10 feet away, staring at him. They weren't cheering him. They were looking at him. With fear, with awe. It was the look one gives to a natural disaster or a biblical figure. A woman stepped forward. It was Mrs. Higgins, the Sunday school teacher. She was holding her granddaughter's hand. She walked up to Elias, trembling. "Mr. Elias?" she whispered. Elias looked up. His face was gray, drained of all color. His eyes, usually so sharp, looked hollow. The energy he had channeled, the pulse of the earth, had taken something from him. He looked 20 years older than he had at dawn. "Thank you," Mrs. Higgins sobbed, and she reached out to touch his coat. "You saved us. You're a prophet." Elias flinched as if she had burned him. He pulled his coat away, standing up shakily. "No," he rasped, his voice sounding like dry leaves. "Don't do that. Don't you put that on me." "But you knew," a man from the crowd shouted. "You saw it when the machines couldn't. You have the gift." The crowd began to close in. The desperation that had turned to joy was now turning into reverence, and it was suffocating. They wanted to touch him. They wanted him to tell them everything was going to be okay forever. They wanted another miracle. Sarah saw the panic in Elias's eyes. She dropped her shovel and pushed through the crowd. "Back off," she ordered, stepping between Elias and the people. "Give him air. Can't you see he's exhausted?" "He's a hero," someone yelled. "He's a man who hasn't slept in 2 days." Sarah snapped. She turned to Elias. "Get in the truck." Elias looked at her, gratitude swimming in his exhausted gaze. He fumbled with the door handle of his Ford. "Wait!" Mayor Vance came running up, looking flustered and muddy. "Elias, the news crews are coming. The helicopters are already on the radar from Vegas. We need a statement. We need you to stand by the geyser for a photo." Elias paused. He looked at the roaring column of water, then at the frenzied crowd, then at the mayor. He spat on the ground, a glob of mud and saliva. "The water is for drinking, Vance," Elias said quietly. "Not for selling." He climbed into the cab of his truck. The engine sputtered, then caught with a cloud of black smoke. He didn't wait for the crowd to clear. He just started rolling. The people parted, watching him go with wide eyes. He drove slowly down the access road, moving against the flow of incoming traffic, a solitary figure leaving the scene of his greatest triumph. Sarah watched him go, feeling a pang of profound sadness. He had given them life, and in return, they were going to try to consume him. "Let him go," Sarah said to Vance, who was staring open-mouthed. "You handle the news crews, Mayor. You're good at talking. Let him sleep." Sarah turned back to the geyser. The rig was stabilized, the water was flowing, and the immediate crisis was over. Now came the reality. She walked over to where Miller was inspecting the damaged derrick. "How bad?" she asked. Miller wiped grease from his forehead. "The rig is totaled. Frame is twisted, but the casing seems to be holding. The pressure is stabilizing. It's not a burst. It's a flow. A steady, high-volume artesian flow." "Sarah, do you have any idea how much water this is?" Sarah looked at the trench. It was a river. Based on the velocity and the diameter, I'd estimate 5,000 gallons a minute. Maybe more. It's enough to fill the reservoir in a month. It's enough to farm the whole county. Miller shook his head, laughing softly. "And we found it with a stick. A goddamn stick." "We found it because he listened," Sarah corrected him, looking at the orange X she had sprayed on the rock. It was almost washed away now. The rest of the day was a blur of logistics. The National Guard trucks that were supposed to evacuate the town arrived at noon, but instead of loading refugees, they were repurposed to haul sandbags and engineering equipment. The soldiers, initially confused, joined the celebration. By sunset, the geyser had been nicknamed Elias's Fountain. Sarah sat on the tailgate of the mayor's SUV, watching the sun go down. The valley below, usually a bowl of dust at this hour, was glistening. The old creek bed was wet. Mud puddles reflected the twilight. The air, usually dry enough to crack lips, was humid. Sweet. She picked up her tablet. She had a report to write. She had to explain to the state board how she had drilled into a granite shelf and found an ocean. She had to explain why her scientific data was wrong and why a willow branch was right. She typed a few sentences, then deleted them. There were no words in her scientific vocabulary for what had happened today. She looked at the sample tray where the broken pieces of the willow branch lay. She picked one up. It was just wood, dead cells, cellulose, bark. But when she held it, she felt a phantom vibration in her hand, a memory of the force that had pulled Elias to his knees. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from the mayor. CNN is here. They want the water wizard. Do you know where he lives? Sarah stared at the screen. She knew exactly where he lived. A shack out past the ridge in the silence. She looked at the media vans setting up their satellite dishes, the vultures circling the miracle. She typed back, no idea. He's gone. She put the phone away and drove down the mountain. She didn't go to the town celebration. She didn't go to the hotel. She drove toward the Badlands, toward the silence. She needed to understand. She needed to ask him the question that was burning a hole in her logic. How? She pulled up to Elias's shack an hour later. It was dark, the only light coming from a kerosene lamp in the window. The old Ford truck was parked out front, cooling in the night air. Sarah got out, her boots crunching on the gravel. She knocked on the door. It's open. Elias's voice came from inside. She pushed the door open. The shack was sparse. Cot, a stove, a table. The walls were covered in maps, but not geological maps. They were old hand-drawn maps of the territory, covered in strange symbols and lines. Elias was sitting at the table, bandaging his hands. The raw, blistered flesh of his palms looked painful. He looked up at her, his eyes tired but clear. You didn't tell them, he said. It wasn't a question. I told them you vanished, Sarah said, closing the door behind her. She pulled a chair out and sat opposite him. She reached into her bag and pulled out a bottle of medical-grade disinfectant and fresh gauze. Let me do that. You'll get an infection. Elias hesitated, then extended his hands. Sarah worked in silence for a moment, cleaning the wounds caused by the willow branch. The water isn't going to stop, is it? Sarah asked softly. No, Elias said. It's been waiting a long time. It has a lot to say. The town is going crazy, Sarah said, wrapping the gauze. They think you're a saint. They're already talking about building a statue. Elias snorted. Statues don't drink. They just stand there and get pooped on by pigeons. Sarah finished the bandage. She held his hands for a moment longer than necessary. Elias, today on the rock, the gravimeter, it read zero density. It defied physics. How did you know the water was there? Not the feeling. I want to know, how did you know the rock would break? Elias looked at the lamp flame. The earth has a rhythm, Sarah, like a heart. Boom, 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 boom. When you drilled before, you were drilling into the bone. Dead sound. But up there, underneath the rock, I could hear the rush. It wasn't just water. It was pressure. It was wanting to break. I didn't break the rock. I just showed it where to crack. He looked at her, his expression serious. But that's not why you're here. You're here because you're scared. Scared. Sarah frowned. We won. We saved the town. You saved the bodies, Elias said. But water changes things, Doctor. It brings life, but it brings greed, too. Before, everyone was equal in the drought. Now someone owns the tap. That water is going to make this town rich. And money makes people do things that drought never could. Sarah felt a chill. She hadn't thought about that. She had only thought about the survival. But Elias was right. The water rights to that geyser were worth millions. The Nestle trucks would be next. The lawyers. The politicians. So what do we do? Sarah asked, realizing she was asking the old man for guidance again. Elias stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the distant glow of the floodlights on the mountain. We protect the source, he said. The water came up because we asked it nicely. If they try to cage it, if they try to sell it, it will go back down. I've seen it before. He turned to her. Tomorrow the suits arrive. The corporate men. They're going to want to sign papers. They're going to want to bottle it. You have to stop them, Sarah. I can find the water, but I can't fight the sharks. That's your world. Sarah stood up. She looked at this frail man who had commanded the earth, now asking her to command the law. She felt a new weight settling on her shoulders. The drilling was the easy part. The war for the water was just beginning. I'll stop them, Sarah said, and for the first time, she felt not like a scientist observing a phenomenon, but like a guardian protecting a sacred trust. Good, Elias said. He blew out the lamp. Now let an old man sleep. Tomorrow is going to be loud. The morning brought a silence that was terrifyingly artificial. The roar of the geyser, which had been the heartbeat of the night, had been dampened. Overnight, the National Guard engineers, working under emergency floodlights, had managed to install a blowout preventer and a diverter valve on the wellhead. The majestic, chaotic column of water that had baptized the town was now imprisoned in a maze of steel piping, channeled into a temporary holding pond that had been frantically excavated by the townspeople. It was controlled. It was measured. And because it was measured, it could now be stolen. Sarah Jenkins stood on the ridge overlooking the drill site, sipping coffee that tasted like burnt aluminum. The sun was hammering down with its usual vengeance, but the humidity in the valley had risen to a tropical level. Below her, the scene looked less like a miracle and more like a crime scene. Yellow caution tape fluttered in the hot wind. Men in hazmat suits, unnecessary but theatrical, were taking samples. And parked in a phalanx near the entrance of the access road were 5 black SUVs. Their polished chrome gleaming aggressively against the backdrop of rust and red dirt. They weren't local. The license plates were from Sacramento and D.C. The sharks, as Elias had predicted, had smelled the blood in the water before the mud had even dried. Dr. Jenkins? Sarah turned. A man was climbing the ridge toward her. He was dressed in a suit that cost more than most of the houses in Dry Creek. He wore aviator sunglasses and navigated the loose screens with the careful disdain of someone who viewed nature as a zoning issue. He didn't look like a villain. He looked like a solution. That made him dangerous. I'm Arthur Sterling, he said, extending a hand that was perfectly manicured. General Counsel for the Western Water Coalition. And this is Mr. Halloway from the Department of the Interior. He gestured to a silent, sweating man trailing behind him. Sarah ignored the hand. You're fast, Sterling. The water barely hit the ground before you filed the flight plan. Sterling smiled, a practiced expression that didn't reach his eyes. Crisis management requires speed, Doctor. We saw the satellite thermal balloon. We saw the news reports. A new artesian source in a level 5 drought zone? It's a matter of national security. It's a matter of Dry Creek, Sarah said, crossing her arms. This is municipal land. The water belongs to the township. Technically, Sterling corrected, pulling a tablet from his briefcase. Subterranean mineral and resource rights at this depth. 300 feet, was it? Are subject to federal review under the Emergency Resource Act of 2024, especially when the resource crosses interstate subterranean fault lines. He tapped the screen. We have a geological injunction, Sarah. We're taking over the site. For the public good, of course. Sarah felt the blood rush to her face. You're going to pipe it to Las Vegas, she said flatly. You're going to drain this aquifer to fill swimming pools on the strip while this town withers. We're going to manage a volatile resource, Sterling said, his voice dropping to a confidential whisper. Look at this place, Sarah. These people, they're farmers, mechanics. They don't have the infrastructure to handle 5,000 gallons a minute. The pressure alone could blow their pipes. We're offering a solution. We cap it, we meter it, we integrate it into the state grid, and Dry Creek gets a guaranteed subsidized percentage. It's a win-win. A percentage? Sarah laughed. A harsh sound. You're offering them a cup of water from their own well. I'm offering them survival, Sterling said, his smile fading. Without us, they have a flood. With us, they have a paycheck. Mayor Vance is already reviewing the contract. Sarah's heart sank. Vance. She had forgotten about the desperation of a politician who had presided over a dying town. She brushed past Sterling, sliding down the gravel slope. If you touch that valve before the environmental impact study is filed, I'll sue you personally for endangerment. She threw back over her shoulder. We'll see you at the town meeting at noon, Doctor. Sterling called out cheerfully. Wear something nice. Sarah drove straight to the town hall. The mood in the streets had shifted. Yesterday's euphoria was replaced by a nervous, buzzing energy. Rumors were flying faster than the dust. The government is paying $1 million. They're going to arrest Elias. The water is radioactive. When she burst into the mayor's office, she found Vance sitting at his desk, staring at a thick stack of legal documents. He looked like a man who had been rescued from a desert island only to be handed a bill for the boat ride. Don't sign it, Vance, Sarah said, slamming the door. Vance looked up, his eyes bloodshot. They're offering $20 million, Sarah, upfront, plus royalties. In exchange for what? Sarah grabbed the contract, flipping through the pages. Exclusive extraction rights. Clause 4. Control of flow rate determined by state need. Clause 12. Eminent domain over access roads. Vance, they're buying the town. If you sign this, Dry Creek becomes a pumping station. They'll fence off the ridge. No one will be allowed near the water. We're broke, Vance shouted, standing up. Look at the books, Sarah. We can't afford to fix the pipes to distribute this water, even if we wanted to. We don't have the pumps, the filtration, the storage. We have water, but we can't drink it until it's treated. Sterling promised to build a treatment plant within a month. Sterling is a vulture, Sarah snapped. He represents the people who drained the Colorado River. There is another way. We can file for a municipal grant. We can retain the rights. It will be harder, yes. It will take time, but it will be yours. Vance slumped back down. I have 300 families who haven't had a steady income in 2 years. I can't tell them to wait for a grant that might never come. The meeting is in an hour. I'm presenting the offer. Sarah stared at him. She realized that logic wouldn't work here. This was about fear. Vance was afraid of being the mayor who let the miracle slip away. She needed something stronger than legal arguments. She needed the man who had found the water. She drove to the shack in the Badlands. The heat was climbing again, a reminder that the desert was still waiting to reclaim them. When she arrived, Elias was gone. The shack was empty. The Ford truck was missing. Panic flared in her chest. Had he run? Had he retreated back into the silence? She pulled out her phone and tracked the GPS transponder she had secretly slapped on the bumper of his truck the night before. A precaution she had told herself was for his safety, but now felt like a violation. The dot was moving. He wasn't running away. He was heading toward the drill site. Sarah spun the Jeep around and gunned the engine. The scene at the Devil's Anvil was tense. The black SUVs were parked in a semicircle. Sterling and his team were standing by the holding pond, looking at the water with the greedy calculation of gold miners. But their path was blocked. Elias's rusted Ford truck was parked sideways across the access road, blocking the gate. Elias was sitting on the hood, whittling a piece of wood. He looked calm, almost bored. A security guard from Sterling's team was shouting at him. "Sir, you need to move this vehicle. This is a restricted area." Elias didn't look up. "Road's closed," he said softly. Sarah pulled up and jumped out. She ran to Elias. "They're going to arrest you, Elias. Get in the car." "Let them try," Elias said. looking at the approaching suits. Sterling walked up, wiping his forehead with a silk handkerchief. "Ah, the local hero. Mr. Elias, is it? We appreciate your service in locating the resource. Truly. But you're obstructing federal agents." Elias stopped whittling. He pointed the knife, a small, dull pocket knife, at the water. "That ain't a resource suit, man. It's a gift. And you don't sell gifts." "Everything is for sale, Mr. Elias," Sterling said smoothly. "It's just a matter of price. We're prepared to offer you a substantial finder's fee. Enough to retire. Somewhere cooler, perhaps?" Elias laughed. It was a dry, cracking sound. "You think I want your paper? You think I walked 50 miles in the sun for money?" He slid off the hood of the truck and took a step towards Sterling. The security guards put their hands on their holsters. "I'm warning you," Sterling said, his smile gone. "We have the paperwork. We have the mayor's verbal agreement. This site is under our jurisdiction." "The mayor speaks for the town," Elias said. "But he don't speak for the water." "This is ridiculous," Sterling sighed. "Officer, remove him." Two large men in tactical gear stepped forward. Sarah stepped in front of Elias. "If you touch him, you'll have a PR nightmare that will bury your stock price," she hissed. "He's the face of this miracle. You arrest him, and every news channel in the world will run the footage of Big Water bullying a 70-year-old hero." Sterling paused. He knew she was right. He signaled the guards to stand down. "Fine," he said, checking his watch. "The town meeting is in 30 minutes. We'll settle this democratically. The people will decide. And believe me, Dr. Jenkins, hungry people always choose the meal ticket." The town hall meeting was a pressure cooker. The air conditioning had been fixed, but the atmosphere was suffocating. Every seat was filled. People were standing in the aisles. The mood was fractured. Some people were shouting about the money, others were shouting about their rights. Sterling stood on the stage, a PowerPoint presentation glowing behind him. He showed graphs, architectural renderings of a shiny new water plant, and projected income figures. He painted a picture of a dry creek that was lush, green, and rich. He spoke of partnership and stewardship. He was brilliant. He was terrifying. "We will handle the burden," Sterling concluded, his voice booming. "We will take the risk. All you have to do is sign the lease. $20 million for the town treasury. Immediately. A new school, a new hospital, and guaranteed water quotas for every farm." A cheer went up. It was seductive. It was easy. Mayor Vance stepped up to the microphone. I think this is our best option," he stammered. "I intend to sign the letter of intent." "Wait," Sarah stood up from the front row. "Read the fine print, Vance. The quota is subject to climatic availability. That means if the drought continues elsewhere, they can divert our water to California and leave us with the minimum. They aren't guaranteeing you water. They're guaranteeing themselves inventory." "Sit down, Sarah," a farmer yelled. "Let him sign. We need the cash. You're selling your soul for a check that will bounce." Sarah shouted back. The room erupted into chaos. Shouting matches broke out. It was on the verge of a brawl. Then the double doors opened. Elias didn't walk in this time. He was pushed in. He was in a wheelchair, pushed by Mrs. Higgins. He looked exhausted, his energy spent from the standoff at the ridge. But as he entered, the room quieted. They wheeled him to the front. He didn't take the microphone. He signaled for silence. "Mr. Sterling," Elias said, his voice weak but clear, "you talk about water like it's oil, like it's dead." "I talk about it like a commodity, Mr. Elias," Sterling replied from the podium, "because that's what the world runs on." Elias reached into his pocket. He pulled out a small glass jar. It was filled with the water from the geyser. It was slightly brown, swirling with sediment. "This water," Elias said, holding it up to the light. "It came from the deep, below the granite. Sarah, Dr. Jenkins, she knows what that means." He looked at Sarah. Sarah frowned. She thought about the depth, the isolation. "It's primordial," Sarah whispered, realizing what he was getting at. It ain't just water, Elias said to the crowd. I tasted it. Tastes like the old world. If you put that in a pipe, if you treat it with chlorine and fluoride and shove it through plastic, you kill it. You kill the blessing. This is mysticism. Sterling scoffed. We are talking about economics. We are talking about blood. Elias roared, surging out of the wheelchair with a burst of strength that shocked everyone. He stood on trembling legs. This town died because we forgot who we were. We thought we were masters of the land. We pumped the ground dry. And now the earth gave us a second chance. A mercy. And you want to sell the mercy to the highest bidder? He looked at the faces in the crowd. His neighbors, the people who had mocked him, the people he had saved. If you sign that paper, Elias said, his voice shaking with emotion, the water will stop. That's scientifically impossible, Sterling said. Is it? Elias turned to Sarah. Tell him, doctor. Tell him about the pulse. Sarah stood up. She looked at Sterling, then at the town. She knew she had to bridge the gap between Elias's magic and the town's fear. The geyser relies on pressure equilibrium. Sarah lied? Or perhaps she wasn't lying. She didn't know anymore. The geological structure is fragile. If you install industrial pumps, if you extract at the rate Mr. Sterling is proposing, you risk collapsing the cavern roof. You won't just drain the water. You'll seal it off forever. The site cannot support industrial extraction, can only support local sustenance. It was a bluff, a massive scientific bluff. But she delivered it with the absolute conviction of a PhD. Sterling's face flushed. That is speculation. Our engineers. Your engineers didn't find the water. Sarah cut him off. We did. The room went silent. The fear of losing the money was suddenly outweighed by the fear of losing the water entirely. Mayor Vance looked at the contract. He looked at Elias, standing there like an Old Testament prophet. He looked at Sarah, the scientist who had risked her career. Vance picked up the pen. He hovered over the paper. Sterling leaned in, practically salivating. Vance closed the folder. I'm sorry, Mr. Sterling, Vance said, his voice gaining strength. We're going to file for the municipal grant. We'll build the pipes ourselves. Slowly. You're making a mistake, Sterling hissed, grabbing his briefcase. A massive mistake. We will bury you in litigation. We will condemn the land. You won't see a drop of that water without a court order. Get out, Vance said. Sterling glared at the room. You're all going to die in this dust bowl, he spat. He stormed out, his entourage trailing behind him like angry wasps. The room erupted in cheers, real cheers this time. People hugged Elias. They slapped Vance on the back. But Sarah didn't cheer. She watched Sterling leave. She saw the look in his eyes. It wasn't defeat. It was calculation. She walked over to Elias, who had collapsed back into the wheelchair. You lied about the pressure, Elias whispered, a twinkle in his eye. And you lied about the water stopping, Sarah whispered back. Did I? Elias looked at the jar in his hand. Maybe, maybe not. Later that night, the celebration was in full swing at the town square. Bonfires were lit. Someone had brought a guitar. The air smelled of barbecue and hope. Sarah was in the makeshift lab she had set up in her hotel room, analyzing the water sample under a microscope. She wanted to understand what Elias meant by primordial. She adjusted the lens. She gasped. The water wasn't just water. At the cellular level, it was teeming with something she had never seen before. Microorganisms. Not bacteria. Not algae. Something bioluminescent. Faint, pulsing light in the dark of the slide. It was alive. Suddenly, the lights in her hotel room flickered and died. The street lights outside went dark. The music in the square stopped. Sarah went to the window. The entire town was blacked out. Her phone rang. It was Miller. Sarah, Miller yelled, panic in his voice. They cut the line. The main power grid to the valley is down. Sterling, Sarah whispered. He had pulled the plug. And Sarah, Miller continued, breathless. There's something else. The geyser. The sound changed. The sputtering. Sarah grabbed her keys and ran out the door into the darkness. The war hadn't ended in the town hall. It had just moved to the shadows. And now, the sharks were going to try to kill the town before it could even take its first drink. The darkness that had fallen over Dry Creek was absolute. It wasn't just the absence of streetlights or the eerie, dead squares of the hotel windows. It was a heavy, suffocating blanket that seemed to press the very oxygen out of the valley. Sarah Jenkins drove her Jeep blindly, relying on muscle memory and the erratic flashes of lightning that had begun to split the sky to the north. A dry storm, heat lightning, promising fire but no rain. As she ascended the winding access road toward the Devil's Ville, the silence terrified her more than the dark. The roar, that magnificent, thunderous voice of the geyser that had defined the last 24 hours, was gone. In its place was a sickening, rhythmic chugging sound, like a dying engine or a fluid-filled lung struggling for breath. She skidded into the drill site, her headlights carving violent arcs through the dust. The scene was a tableau of disaster. The floodlights were dead. The only illumination came from flashlights beaming erratically like panic-stricken fireflies. Miller was on the drilling deck, screaming orders into the dark, his voice cracking with desperation. "It's the valve!" Miller shouted as Sarah scrambled up the ladder, her boots sliding on the wet, muddy steel. "The electronic actuator is dead. It locked shut when the grid went down. It should have a failsafe." Sarah yelled back, shining her mag light onto the massive steel assembly that capped the borehole. The pipes were shuddering violently, groaning under an immense, unseen weight. The failsafe was bypassed. Miller pointed to a sheared metal housing on the side of the blowout preventer. Wires dangled loose, sparking intermittently. Someone physically jammed the solenoid. "They forced it closed, Sarah. The pressure is building up behind the cap. There's a pressure cooker down there. If we don't open this valve in 10 minutes, the back pressure will fracture the casing. The borehole will collapse, and the water will find a new path miles underground. We'll lose it forever." Sarah felt a cold rage knifing through her. Sterling. He hadn't just cut the power. He had sent someone up here to ensure that if he couldn't monetize the miracle, Dry Creek wouldn't survive to celebrate it. It was a scorched earth policy, executed with corporate efficiency. "Manual override," Sarah commanded, grabbing a heavy iron wheel attached to the side of the valve assembly. "We have to crank it open." I tried. Miller wiped grease and sweat from his eyes. "It's jammed. The pressure against the gate is too high. It's like trying to open a door against a tsunami." Sarah grabbed the wheel. It was cold and slick with oil. She heaved, putting her back into it, gritting her teeth until her jaw ached. The wheel didn't budge. It was solid, mocking her. The pipes beneath her feet vibrated with a terrifying frequency, a low hum that rattled her bones. The earth was angry. It had been invited out, only to be slammed shut. "We need leverage," Sarah screamed. "Get a cheater bar. Get everyone." Suddenly, a pair of headlights appeared at the bottom of the hill. Then another, and another. A long, winding river of light began to flow up the access road. The town was coming. They had seen the darkness. They had heard the silence. Hundreds of vehicles poured onto the plateau. They didn't park in rows. They arranged themselves instinctively in a circle, their high beams pointing inward, turning the drilling rig into a brilliantly lit stage. The light was blinding, washing out the shadows, revealing the terror on the faces of the crew. Mayor Vance jumped out of the lead truck. "What's happening?" "Sabotage," Sarah shouted down from the rig. "We need muscle. We need every strong back you have. Get up here." They didn't hesitate. Farmers, mechanics, high school football players, they swarmed the rig. There was no room for everyone on the platform, so they formed a human chain, passing heavy pipe wrenches and pry bars up to the deck. Miller jammed a 6-foot steel pipe through the spokes of the manual override wheel to create a lever. "On 3, he bellowed. "Pull." 5 men grabbed the pipe. Sarah grabbed the wheel ring. 1, 2, 3. They pulled. Muscles strained. Veins popped in necks. The steel pipe bent slightly under the force, but the valve didn't move. The thump 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 of the pressurized water hammering against the gate grew louder, faster. The ground began to shake. A hairline fracture appeared in the concrete foundation of the rig. "It's not moving!" a young mechanic yelled, panic rising in his voice. "We're going to snap the stem. Pull harder," Sarah screamed, tears of frustration stinging her eyes. "We are not letting this die." They heaved again. A bolt sheared off the flange with a sound like a gunshot, whistling past Sarah's ear. Steam began to hiss from the joints. The rig was destabilizing. "Clear the deck," Miller shouted. "It's going to blow." The men hesitated, looking at the valve, then at the town below. They didn't want to leave, but the physics were undeniable. They were fighting millions of pounds of geological pressure with bare hands. Then, a silence fell over the crowd below. The sea of people parted. Elias walked through the light. He didn't run. He moved with a slow, painful shuffle. He had abandoned the wheelchair. He looked spectral in the harsh glare of the headlights. His skin translucent, his frame skeletal, his duster coat hanging off him like a shroud. But his eyes were blazing with a blue fire that outshone the high beams. He climbed the ladder. Every step was a battle. His breath came in ragged gasps. When he reached the deck, the men stepped back, lowering their flypaths. Elias walked to the valve. He didn't grab the wheel. He placed his palms flat against the cold, vibrating steel of the main pipe. He closed his eyes. He leaned his forehead against the metal, as if listening to a secret being whispered by the water. "It's hurting," Elias whispered. His voice was barely audible, but in the sudden quiet, Sarah heard him clearly. "It's trapped. Scared." "Elias," Sarah said softly, stepping toward him. "It's mechanically jammed. We need hydraulics." Elias shook his head slowly. "Force makes it fight back. You're pushing against the heart, Sarah. You have to ask." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the broken piece of the willow branch, the one that had snapped when the water first broke through. He wedged the small piece of wood into the gap between the valve stem and the housing. It seemed ridiculous, a twig against a machine. Then Elias took a deep breath. He placed his hands on the wheel, not gripping it to turn, but resting them there. He began to hum. It was a low, dissonant tone, matching the vibration of the pipes. He adjusted his pitch, sliding down the scale until his voice locked into a perfect resonance with the shuddering earth. "Now," Elias whispered, together, but gentle, like opening a hand. He nodded to Sarah. He nodded to Miller. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. She stepped up. She didn't grab the wheel with panic this time. She took a breath. She placed her hands next to Elias's. Miller did the same. "Turn," Elias murmured. They applied pressure. Not a jerk, but a steady, fluid motion. For a second, nothing happened. Then, a deep groan echoed from inside the metal. The vibration changed pitch. The piece of willow wood crunched. Creak. The wheel turned. Just an inch. A jet of water sprayed out from the seal, hitting Elias in the chest, soaking him instantly. He didn't flinch. He smiled. "There you are," he whispered to the water. "Keep turning," Miller shouted, hope surging in his voice. "It's unseated." They turned again, and again. The pressure began to equalize. The mechanical scream of the pipes died down, replaced by the rush of flow. The wheel spun freely now. "Clear," Miller yelled, spinning it wide open. Whoosh, the water returned. It didn't explode violently this time. The diverter pipes caught it. It surged into the holding pond with a heavy, satisfying roar. A sound of abundance and relief. The ground stopped shaking. The air filled with the sweet, cool mist of the deep earth. A cheer erupted from the town. A sound so loud it seemed to crack the sky. Car horns honked. People embraced. The nightmare was over. Sarah leaned against the railing, laughing, crying, shaking from adrenaline. She turned to hug Elias, but Elias wasn't standing. He had slumped against the blowout preventer, sliding down to the metal deck. His hat had fallen off. His head was tipped back, resting on the cold steel. The water spray was misting over his face, looking like tears he hadn't shed. Elias! Sarah dropped to her knees. She grabbed his shoulders. Elias! We did it! Look! His eyes were open, looking up at the stars that were finally breaking through the storm clouds. He was smiling, a genuine, peaceful smile that smoothed out the decades of wrinkles on his face. I hear it, he whispered, his voice faint, bubbling like a brook. It's singing a new song now. Stay with me, Sarah said, checking his pulse. It was thready, weak. Miller, get the medic, get the truck. Elias gripped her wrist. His hand was cold, but his grip was surprisingly firm. No, he said. Don't move me. Not now. Elias, you're going into shock. We need to get you to a hospital. Sarah, he said, locking eyes with her. The water, it didn't come because I called it. Came because it was time. I was just the doorman. He coughed, a wet, rattling sound. You're the guardian now. You know the science. You know the law. Keep the sharks away. I can't do it without you, Sarah choked out. I don't know how to listen like you do. Elias reached up and touched the pocket of her vest, where she had kept the sample of the bioluminescent water. You saw the light in the dark, didn't you? You saw the life. He tapped her chest, right over her heart. You listen with this now. The machine is just a tool. The truth is in the dirt. His eyes drifted back to the column of water rising into the night. It's good water, he murmured. Sweet water. He took a breath, deep and slow, inhaling the mist. He didn't exhale. The hand gripping Sarah's wrist relaxed. His eyes remained fixed on the water, reflecting the headlights, reflecting the stars, reflecting the miracle he had pulled from the stone. Elias? Sarah whispered. She waited, but the only answer was the roar of the water. Sarah bowed her head, pressing her forehead against his cold hand. Around them, the town was still cheering, unaware that the cost of their salvation had just been paid in full. Epilogue, 3 months later. The funeral had been the biggest event in the county's history. They buried him on the ridge, overlooking the valley, right next to the spring. They didn't put a marble headstone. Sarah had insisted on a simple marker, a rough-hewn block of granite, and planted next to it, a willow sapling. Dry Creek was no longer dry. The name remained, but it was an irony now. The valley was a quilt of green. The corn was waist-high. The reservoir was half full, shimmering like a turquoise jewel. The legal battle with Sterling and the Western Water Coalition had been brutal but brief. The discovery of the sabotage, the jam valve, had been the smoking gun Sarah needed. The scandal destroyed Sterling's firm. The Elias Act, a piece of legislation protecting small-town independent aquifers, was currently moving through Congress, championed by a very loud, very confident Mayor Vance. Sarah stood on the ridge, looking down at the town. She wasn't wearing her hazmat suit or her government vest. She wore jeans and a flannel shirt, sleeves rolled up. She held a clipboard, checking the flow rates. The new municipal piping system was almost finished. It was sustainable. It was theirs. She closed the clipboard and walked over to Elias's grave. The willow sapling was thriving, its roots drinking deep from the moisture that permeated the soil. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small object. It was a dowsing rod she had made herself from a branch of the new willow. She felt silly holding it. She was a scientist. She dealt in facts. But as she stood there, the wind shifted. She smelled the rain coming, real rain, from the clouds gathering in the west. She held the stick out loosely, just as he had taught her. She closed her eyes. She stopped thinking about the flow rate. She stopped thinking about the pressure variance. She just listened. She felt the hum of the pipes below. She felt the vibration of the trucks on the highway. And beneath it all, she felt a slow, steady thrum. Thump, 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 thump. The heartbeat of the valley. The stick in her hand twitched. Just a little. Sarah smiled. A tear traced a line through the dust on her cheek. I hear you, she whispered to the wind. She placed the stick on the granite stone, patted turned to walk back down the hill. The first drops of rain began to fall, mixing with the spray of the fountain, washing